thundering morning. Light on stone. Voices in the market. Bread in the ovens. No one heard the mountain choosing. Warm was the street in the late summer glow. Laughter and trade in the rhythm below. Children were running through fountains in dust. Life in its fullness, a certain things must.
Wine on the tables, bright cloth in the square, perfume and sunlight alive in the air.
So near.
Then came a tremor, a pause in the day. Birds took the silence and carried it away. A darkening rose where the blues should have been. The summit exhaling a terror unseen. Mothers looked upward, the whole city stilled as heaven turned heavy and daylight was killed. No sword was lifted, no legion came near. Only the mountain and gathering fear. The world did not end with a trumpet or cry, but with stone from the heart of a blackened sky. Falling from pain, home from the fire could not keep. Names in the ash where the lost still sleep. Hands reaching out where the last light died. Love standing helpless with nowhere to hide. City of breath and flame. Time took your people, but not your name. Buried in silence and sorrow and pride. Still you are crawling across the decay.
The roofs gave way under the merciless rain. Streets became rivers of terror and pain. Some fled to the harbor, some ran for the gate. Some stayed together and trusted too late. Run now! The sea withdrew like a beast in alarm. The air itself carried ruin and harm. The father held fast to the ones at his side. A mother kept singing while hope was denied.
Then came the darkness, no daylight could break. Heat like a judgment, no flesh could outwake. Breath became poison, the city went still. Covered by fury, by stone, by the wind.
Forgive us. No enemy conquered you. No empire condemned you. The earth opened its silence and answered with fire. Hear the distant crying under burial walls. hear the quiet after the falling awe. A cup on the table, a door left wide, a life interrupted and sealed inside. Remember what the fire could not keep. Nails in the earth where the lost still sleep. Hands reaching out where the lost light died. Lost, only helpless, with nowhere to hide. City of breath and flight. Time to be a people, but not your name. Buried in silence, in sorrow, in grief. Still you are calling across the decline. The ovens grew cold. The voices were taken. But under the ash, where empires rust, columns stand like widowed kings. Beneath the hush of broken things. Once there were triumphs, once there were drums. Now only the cold of the twilight comes. The road still runs through field and rain, but not with the pride of the old campaign. Standards faded, eagles bowed, silence deeper than any crowd. What was eternal bends at last, even the greatest becomes the past. Who could have dreamed that the heart of the world would dim not in one slave, but in centuries of wear, of fracture, hunger and pain. Rome is fallen, stone by stone. A mighty voice turns to a morning tone. Crowns and banners, ash and sky. Even the grandest of names can die. Rome is fading, slow and long. Not in a cry, but a sorrowful song. What once commanded sea and land slips like dust from an aging hand. Frontiers cracked where the cold winds drove. Strangers entered where legions rove. Treasury thinned, the order frayed. Old foundations quietly gave way. The emperors rose and were lost like rain. None could gather the whole again. Faith was changing, the old God slept. Mothers prayed while the watchfires wept. In the west the daylight thinned, palaces hollow beneath the wind. Then came the hour no wall could hide, when Rome was taken of all her pride. No empire falls in a single evening. It weakens in memory, in ambition, in the failure to remain. What it once demanded of itself. retreating feet. A city of law, of sword, of flame, now trembling beneath its immortal name. Remember, Rome is fallen, stone by stone. The mighty voice tied to a morning tone. Crowns and banners, ash and sky. Even the grandest of names can know. Rome is fading, slow and long. Not in a cry, but a sorrowful song. What once commanded sea and land slips like dust from an aging heart. Rome is fallen, yet still remains. Sun is fallen, alive in ruins, it rose in lines. The throne is broken, the eagles still call through shattered gates and deserted halls. Rome, remember what you were. The law, the dream, the conqueror. For though the empire met its end, its ghost walks on where the ages bend. They entered in columns through cold, choking rain. Roads turning to rivers of burden and strain. Standards hung heavy, the wagons sank low. Deep in a wilderness none seemed to know. The banners of Rome in the downpour grew dim. Confidence breaking at every limb. Varus kept moving through timber and mist, blind to the trap in the barbarian twist. Too late. Branches were closing like hands from the sky. Every dark pathway refusing a reply. No open field, no formation, no light. Only wet terror and fragments of fight. The thunder of empire was swallowed by wood, and pride marched on where no army should. March on. A whisper of iron, a cry in the rain, a spear from the darkness again and again. The legions were fading when no glory shone. Each step pulling deeper from mortar to stone. Hold fast, Teutoburg, black rain on Rome. 3 lost legions far from home. Under the branches, under the stain, the empire was broken by forest and rain. For Teutoburg, night without flame, mourn over honor and death over name. What marched in with power and eagle and drum, left only silence when morning had come. Arminius knew every route, every bend. The smile of a guide in the heart of an end. He waited with patience, then tore at the line, cutting the serpent one coil at a time. Strike now! Shield could not lock in the swamp and the mire. Discipline drowned in the cold and the wire.
turning slowly to prey in the air. 3 days of ruin, of splintering scream. Rome waking inside of a shattered dream. No rescue was coming, no trumpet would save. The forest kept feeding the mouth of the grave.
Gone now. Empire believes that roads can tame the world. But there are places that do not kneel. Places that remember no law, but survival. Hear the piano under the storm, soft as a prayer for the dying worn. Hear the strings of the dark wood groan.
An empire grieving in a minor tone.
Remember Teutoburg,
Black rain on Rome,
3 lost legions.
far from home. Under the branches, under the stain, the empire was broken by forest and rain.
Fall Teutoburg,
Night without flame, mud over honor and death over name. What marched in with power and eagle and drum left only silence when morning had come.
Teutoburg,
Grave of command where the proud lost grip of the conquered land. Paris was taken by terror and shame, and Augustus cried out to the gods in pain.
Teutoburg, wound that would stay, a scar on the empire that would not fade away. From that black forest, the ages learned that even great powers can bleed and burn. No marble monument stood there first. Only rain, only branches, only the memory of Rome learning fear.
He wore the purple in an age of strain, while plague and war rolled over the rain. No feast of comfort, no idle delight. He governed through burden and sleepless night.
Stand firm.
On the northern frontier by the river and frost, he counted the weight of all that was lost. Yet under the armor, steady and clear, a mind like a torch kept cutting through fear. The camps were restless, the forests were black. Tribes kept pressing in wave after attack. Still Marcus stood where the hard winds cried, with law in his heart and Rome at his side.
Hold fast.
He answered the turmoil not only with might, but within a command in the depth of the night, where others were broken by power and pain. He mastered himself and carried the strength.
Breathe on.
Marcus Aurelius, flame in the storm, strength of the soul in imperial form.
Sword in the snow.
Thought under fire, would prove. Rule your own spirit and history moves. Not for indulgence, not pride, not gold, but honor and duty through trials untold. Even in sorrow his will remained, a calm forged stronger where others complained.
Endure. You cannot command the world until you confront the riot within. The throne is a burden, and virtue is the only shield that endures. Thoughts in the lamplight no battle could steal. The emperor writing while watchfires burned. Wisdom was earned where the war drums sound. Remember Marcus Aurelius, flame in the storm, strength of the soul in imperial form. Sword in the snow, thought under fire, rising through hardship. Rise now, Marcus Aurelius, stern and wise, bearing the world with unshaken eyes. When fate came down with merciless force, you held the empire to reason's call. Marcus Aurelius, last of the grand, holding the line with disciplined hands. Mind like a fortress, heart like a blade, light in an era beginning to fade. Stand tall, Marcus Aurelius, ruler austere, teaching that courage begins in here. When plague and invasion darken the sky, you showed how a mortal can govern and rule. Peace, Marcus. He did not seek peace in escape, but in mastery. And while the frontiers trembled, his inner kingdom did not fall.
Steel kissed the river, rain covered the flame. Eagles were rising and calling his name. Caesar! Over cold passes and fields torn apart, he entered the storm with a conqueror's heart. In Gaul he was fire, unbending and grim. Tribes broke like waves on the edge of him. Kings lost their ground, proud banners were torn. Out of the carnage, a ruler was born. He measured the battlefield, silence and cries, reading the terror in thousands of eyes. Nothing could hold him where iron feet ran. Victory followed the force of the man. At Alatia the circle was laid, walls against hunger, against the blade. Hunter and hunted were bound in one chain. Genius was written through hardship and pain. Hold fast, Caesar, rise. Let the standards fly. Rome in your grasp beneath the blood-red sky. No diadem rested on your head. Still empire stood wherever you lay. Rise high, Caesar stands through the clash of fate. Master of timing at history's gate. From field to senate, the world could see. The path to command began with thee. Then came the breaking of brother and blade. Civil war opened, the debt to be paid. Across the waters he hardened his line, moving with purpose, with terrible design. Right now, at Pharsalos, calm in the face of the tide, he turned fear aside with the will to decide. Horsemen were shattered, the center
held strong. Out of the chaos he forged a new song. He did not inherit a monarch's throne. He made the old order fear its own. Lost sword and glory were drawn into one, and Rome understood what he had become. One man, not emperor in title, yet greater than titles defended by lesser men. He bent the ancient order until another age could begin. Hear the drums roll over stone. Hear the laurel claim its own. Triumph and warning, breath and flame. Future and ruin bearing one name. Caesar, Caesar rise. Let the standards fly. Rome in your grasp beneath the blood-red sky. No diadem rested on your head. Still empire stood wherever you Caesar stands through the clash of fate. Master of timing at history's gate. From field to senate, the world could see. The path to command began with thee. Caesar rise, let the whole world know how the seed of the Principate started to grow. Knives may gleam, you outlive death in the Roman dream. No crown upon you, yet all agree. The age of command found its first decree. Rise. He was no emperor, yet after his march, Rome could never return. The man was mortal, but the legend still burns.
They chained her pain and thought her people would kneel again. Never. But fire remembers what iron has done, and rage can rise like a second sun. Across the valleys, across the plain, the tribes were summoned by grief and flame. No timid prayer, no quiet retreat, only the thunder of thousands of feet. Rome had mistaken the wound for fear. Now judgment rode and the end drew near. Ride on. A widow no longer, a storm in flesh, a vow in the smoke, a blade unsheathed. She called the broken, the proud, the scarred, and turned their sorrow to something hard. Stand fast, Boudica. Rise with the red war sky. Tear down the eagle and let it die. Boudica. Cry through the ash and the flame. Vengeance has come and it speaks your name. Rise now, Boudica, queen of the rebel ground. Shake the empire with the savage sound. What Rome had broken would now return, wrapped in fury and built to burn. Camulo Dunum first filled the wave. Stone and decree could not make it safe. Then Londinium blazed in the night, a city erased by wrath and light. Burn Roads ran crimson with fear and death. The legion staggered, the province shook. Terror lived in the empire's nook. She rode like prophecy, fierce and wild. Mother of ruin, betrayed and defiled. Every torch was a word unspoken before. Every fallen wall was a sentinel in the sky.
You called us weak. You called us conquered. But grief can gather an army, and humiliation can teach a nation to roar.
Over shield and spear, hear the old fat outland's fear. A land once beaten now stands to fight, carrying grief into the heart of the night.
Remember,
rise with the red war sky, tear down the eagle and let it die. Cry through the ash and the flame. Vengeance has come and it speaks your name.
Rise now.
Boudica, queen of the rebel brown, shake the empire with the savage sword. One rule had broken would now return, wrapped in fury and built to
one name remained to gather the broken stones. Not with frenzy, not with reckless thunder, but with patience, law, and iron.
province is scarred. Rome had been split by the hands of its gods. Ash on the standards, dust on the throne. Too many victors, too much undone. Then stepped Octavian, watchful and cold, shaping the ruin to something controlled. He carried no madness, no desperate cry. He built with a stare and a measured design. He learned from the blood and the pride of the past. How power survives is the power that lasts. Not only with glory, not only with fame, but order and structure set deep into flame. From faction banners to discipline lines, he forged a state that could master its time. Quiet as marble, relentless as rain, he gathered the world in a disciplined chain. Hold firm, Augustus, crown of the Roman dawn. Out of the chaos a new age was drawn. Stolen to empire, law into might. You gave the exhausted world structure and light. Augustus, keeper of this to steal, making the wounds of the republic heal. From broken republic to vast domain, you bow the earth with a golden reign. He tempered the legions, made service precise, ending the gamble of war by the dice. A soldier now wanted to do original blade, strength that was trained and deliberately made. Frontiers were guarded, the roads open wide. Wealth moved in safety from tide unto tide. Temples were lifted, the cities restored. Peace wore an armor and carried a sword. He mastered the image, the Senate, the crown. Never too sudden, never too love.
He called himself servant, yet rule with a hand no rival could shake. He curled command and tradition, and made obedience feel like rebirth. Sunlight, iron at night, silence of order after the fight. Trumpets remembered the battles before, but now they were guarding the gates and the shore.
Augustus, crown of the Roman dawn, out of the chaos a new age is drawn. Stone into empire, law into might. You gave me exhausted was structure and light. Augustus, keep us this through steel, making the wounds of the republic heal. For broken republic to vast domain, you bow the house with a golden rain. First on the imperial height, you turn civil ruin to discipline and light. Legions of order, the world held tight, and evil at rest yet ready to strike. Augustus, name carved deep in stone, master of rule from the heart of Rome. Not merely a victor, but builder of span. You torn an empire, how long you can stand.
He ended the fever without ending the dream. He made power endure by giving it form. And where the Republic had torn itself open,
for father sins, no blind ambition in blood-soaked hands. He saw the map with a colder sight, where empire must hold, not endlessly bite. From marble halls to the northern rain, he walked the breadth of the vast domain, a ruler in armor, in dust and wind, measuring where Rome must end and begin. He knew that power was more than flame, more triumph and a conqueror's name. Stone and a
is not only thunder, it is distance, discipline, and the wisdom to know when expansion becomes weakness. Watchfires circle round. Aboard a breeze where the wild winds roll, and stone becomes the promise of Rome. Remember, Hadrian, stone of the frontier line, keeper of limits by measured design. Turn ridges to Roman stone. Not always by conquest is greatness won, but by mating and one of us begun. What came to bandit? Light, bronze in the sun and a world held tight. Far from the Alps and the long Italian years, the reckoning gathered from blood and fear. Scipio stood with a measured breath, not drunk on glory, not blind to death. He read the ground and the lines of men, and knew this hour would not return again. Across the field rose the Punic cry, old victories living in Hannibal's eye. But Rome had followed the war to its source, with patience, discipline, timing, and force. No frantic charge, no desperate blaze, but honor prepared for the clash of days. The desert was silent before the command, history waiting in the heat of the sun. Steady, Zama, burn in the heart of time, where the old war broke on a Roman line. Hannibal thundered but could not remain. Scipio answered and severed the chain. Zama, field of the final turn, where the fate of empires began to burn. Steel against genius, will against flame, and Rome walked out with the weight of the name. Elephants surged with the towers of dread, earth in a tremor beneath every tread. The lanes were open, the horns bit the air. Panic was turned from the wreck standing there. Mercedes so rode a fast who flew, striking the wings till the white dust grew. The center collided in iron and cries. Battle is locking with death in their eyes. And back from the distance the horsemen came, closing the jaws of the battlefield frame. Carthage was broken from front and rear, and the age of Hannibal left it here. Not every victory is louder than the rest. Some victories close a door that centuries cannot reopen. This was one of them. From that day onward, Rome no longer fought to survive, but to rule.
Through patience and fight, not for a raid, not for a fleeting acclaim, but to push out the edge of the Roman domain. Hold the line, Trajan, breaker of the northern wall, raising the eagle above them all. Over the river, over the stone, you took the wild and made it roll. Rise now, Trajan, lord of the widening sphere, driving the border year by year. With iron resolve and disciplined flame, you carve the world with a conqueror's name. The Dacian king still gathered his might, forks in the ridges, blades in the night. Yet siege after siege and assault after blow, Rome kept advancing through hardship and snow. At last the stronghold shattered apart, terror was driven straight into the heart. Gold of the mountains, roads of the state, victory opened the empire's gate. Then farther eastward the columns were cast, his reach extended astonishingly vast. From deserts and ports to the far border raid, the map of the empire grew broad through his reign. Trajan,
He did not inherit the largest world Rome had known. He made it larger. He took the boundary in his hands and forced it to move. Hear the anvils, hear the cry. See the standards cut the sky. A kingdom broken, an empire grown. Glory was earned where the war went for more. March on! Treason, breaker of the northern wall, raising the eagle above them all. Over the river, over the stone, you took the wild and made it wrong. Rise now, treason, lord of the widening spear, driving the border year by year. With iron resolve and discipline flame, you carved the world with a conqueror's name. Treason, master of the furthest line, forging expansion by grand design. Dacia fallen, the world made wide. Rome reached its zenith beneath your stride. To the end, Trajan crowned by the wars you won, a blazing force beneath the sun. From mountain bastion to distant sea, you gave the empire its fastest degree. Where others defended, he expanded. Where others endured, he advanced. And the world remembered how far Rome could go. Young in the ruin, he looked at the flame, saw fallen standards and still stayed the same. While older men trembled and kingdoms gave way, he carried defiance into the day. Stand clear. Spain heard his thunder through fortress and sand. City by city they fell to his hand. Swift as a falcon, precise as a knife, he learned that command is the wager of life. He gathered the broken, restored their belief, turned panic to order and sorrow to steel. No empty boasting, no drunken parade. He moved like a storm with a plan already made. Move now. He crossed through the pressure unshaken, a war with timing so sharp it cut through despair. When Rome needed vision, when fear was the chain, he rose from disaster and mastered the game. Hold fast, Scipio flame of the late dark hour, breaker of terror, rebuilder of power. Bright through the carnage, fierce through the cries, you taught fallen banners again how to rise. Scipio, edge of the Roman will, silent in purpose, relentless and still. Where dread had settled and courage was gone, you turned the night and carried Rome on. Then into Africa, daring and grand, he brought the war to the Punic land. No longer waiting for doom at the gate, he forced his rival to answer to fate. Come down. At Zama the dust of the wide plain burned, the wheel of the ages was suddenly turned. Elephants thundered but gaps opened wide, discipline split their chaotic stride. Then line after line with measured release, he shattered the balance and strangled the beast. Hannibal faced him, two masters of war, but one held the rhythm the field was waiting for. Scipio. Victory is not noise. It is distance, pressure, timing. It is knowing when to hold and when to strike so cleanly that history cannot recover. in a straight line, never where expected. A step to the side, a pause, then fire. A melody shaped like a tram. Again, Scipio, flame of the late dark hour, breaker of terror, rebuilder of power. Right through the carnage, fierce through the cries, you taught fallen banners again how to rise. Scipio, edge of the Roman will, silent in purpose, relentless and still. Where dread had settled and courage was gone, you turned the night and carried Rome on. Scipio, lion of Zama's plain, ending an era through brilliance and pain. Calm in the tempest, pure in command, you read through the fate of sea and land. Stand tall, Scipio, named at the war drums, keep cutting so deep it still does not sleep. Not by fury but vision won, you forged the dawn from a setting sun. Africanus, some conquer by force, some by fear. He conquered by seeing the shape of the end before the battle had begun. When the old world cracked beneath its crown, one soldier still would not lay down. From eastern walls to the western flame, Belisarius carried the Roman name.
Through dust of ruin, through broken command, he rebuilt war with a steadier hand.
The empire was fading, diminished, worn, yet under his banner old pride was reborn.
I was the city of marble and lore, now scarred by time, by fracture, by war.
Still in my silence, one sword remained, one final servant by honor chain. Remember,
No feast of triumph, no endless acclaim, only campaigns in a dying land.
yet where hope weakened and power grew thin, he entered the darkness and carried me out. Belisarius, last light in the flame, right into twilight in Rome's final name. Belisarius, one in the rain, holding together what war could not share. Last one blade, fierce and austere, answering collapse with courage, not fear. When empires trembled and all glory frayed, he stood like thunder, the ages obeyed. He struck through Africa, swift and severe, bringing lost provinces certainly near.
Vandals were broken, the kingdom undone, the eagle still shone in the strength of war.
Eastward the struggle, Italia in pain, cities in ashes, long rivers of rain.
Through siege and winter, through hunger and stone, he fought for the grandeur no longer for throne. I was the memory men could not keep.
Half buried in blood, half buried in sleep.
He gave me a voice in the clash of the blade.
The final defiance that would not fall. Hold on. I did not inherit a world at its height. I inherited ruins.
And still he marched, as if duty alone could command the dead to rise. Hear the drums from the far-off wall. Hear the empire's fading call.
Here one general answers still, with iron heart and unbending will. Belisarius, last light in the flame, riding through twilight and Rome's final name. Belisarius, song in the
mercy, for memory. Iron on flesh and dust and the sun. Another condemned, another undone. Chains on his spirit, scars on his name. Yet something eternal lived under the pain.
He once rode proud where the cold winds blew, with honor, command, and a sky he knew. Now in the cycle of blood and tears, he carried his rage through the weight of the years. The arena trembled, the crowd leaned near, hungry for violence, drunk on fear. But behind his gaze there burned the flame, not of survival, but of reclaiming his name. He had lost his home, he had lost his light, yet sorrow was sharpened to purpose in fight. Every cut and yet every cry brought him closer to his reply. Gladiator, rise from the sand, fate in your eyes and death in your hands. Broken by sorrow, forged by pain, you step through the blood to remember again. Gladiator, scar of the age, silent as grief, fierce as rage. The crowd sees a slave in the heat of the flame, but vengeance is walking and wearing your name. Beneath the armor of dust and disgrace, there still stood a man no chain could erase. Once he commanded the northern line, now he was numbered among the dying. He fed the laughter of decadent kings, the rocks of power and the poisoned breeze. Yet each fallen foe, each deafening cry, lifted his own fire into the sky. The mob wanted spectacle, terror and pain. He gave them a storm they could never contain. Not for their favor, not for their breath, he entered the ring with the promise to death.
I was a commander of the northern armies, faithful to the rightful ruler. I was a father, I was a husband. They took my world, and I will answer in blood and eternity.
Chain and the battle drum, hear what a ruined soul becomes. Steel may wound and kings may reign, but grief learns how to carry a blade. Remember, gladiator, rise from the sand, fate in your eyes and death in your hands. Broken by sorrow, forged by pain, step through the blood to remember again. Gladiator, star of the age, scientist grief, fierce as waves. The crowd sees a slave in the heat of the flame, but vengeance is walking and wearing your
Smasher, roar through the night. judge of the crew and a red torchlight. Empires decay and tyrants fall, but the oath of the wounded outlives them all. Vengeance. The crowd will forget the blood. The empire will forget the man. But pain remembers, and honor waits beyond the lights fade, cold wind through the harbor, through the colonnade. A lone whistle carries where the doomed hearts wait. A hymn for a city standing before its fate. Carthage was glowing in bronze evening fire. Towers still proud, still reaching high. Colors of dying gold, the stones of the old world, silent and old. No cry for mercy in the trembling plea, only the weight of what had to be. Markets abandoned, the courtyards bare, smoke in the distance, salt in the air. Mothers at doorways, hands held tight, watching the rim of the coming night. Each breath was heavy, each glance was long, as if the whole city already knew the song. 3 years of hunger, of waiting, of flame. History closing its hand on unmaimed. Still in the silence, their pride remained unbroken in sorrow. And the red-lit cries, ash on the armor and death in the sky. Street after street was consumed in storm, stone and cedar losing form. The harbor burned with a funeral glow, waves carried embers in the darks below. Men fall in doorways, on rooftops in flame, dying with pride and still bound to their name.
fire erase the soul of a people, the pride of a place. The sea rolled dark by the shattered stone, hearing the city die alone. Yet another ruin under the sky, memory traveled farther than they took his name. They left him breath so he could suffer. Moon over stone in the iron gate, one more soul led down to fate. Chains on his wrists, dust on his skin, but a deeper war was alive within. He had once known the field and the fire, duty, command, and a life rising higher. Now he was sold to the roar of the crowd, to die for the pleasure of cruel and loud men. Every step through the tunnel below carried the weight of what he could not hold. A child once laughing, a hand once warm, all of it lost in a merciless storm. The torches were burning, the trumpets would call, but grief was the sharpest blade of them all. Remember, he was God seeking glory or fame, only a path back through sorrow and flame. In every wound and every scar, he kept the dead ones where they are. Ashes of the arena, rise and remain. Heart full of fury, eyes full of pain. Crowned by the dust, condemned by the chain. Still you endure through the blood and the stain. Ashes of the arena, dark and severe. The crowd squeezed loudly, but you do not hear. You fight for the lost, for the taken, the gone, and carry the memory into the dark. Steel by steel in the furnace light, men fell hard in the jaws of the night. He moved like judgment, cold and exact, nothing wasted, no moment turned back. The emperor smiled from his poison height, feeling on terror, calling in right, burned under the spectacle, under the cries. Vengeance was bloody, the street of his rise. He was an old beast for the feast of breath. He was a verdict still walking to death. The arena wanted a broken slave, instead it awakened a living grave. And when he looked through the smoke and flame, even the mighty grew pale at his name. A hush before the blade. Hear the debts that will be paid. Not all ghosts live in the ground. Some wear armor and answer the sound.
fear the debt that will be paid. Not all ghosts live in the ground. Somewhere armor.
And then show the sun.
What entered the sand was a wounded man.